Alex Storm. Looking to strike right away.
Welcome to another edition of Hardcap here at the 2011 College Championships in Boulder. We just saw the quarters and semifinals today, so the finals matchups are set for Monday. Let's start with the women's division. Adam, let's talk about the latest semifinal. It was Michigan going up against last year's champions, Oregon.
Yeah, so Michigan came in with a pretty bumpy path. They were coming out of pool play, finished up all their games, and were in a position where they had to kind of think, what's going to happen in this last game? If we don't get the result we want, we're done. If we get the result we want, we're playing a pre-quarter in like an hour. So they ended up getting what they needed, and since then they've been pretty much rolling. They had a tight win over UW in the pre-quarter, and then pretty much controlled the whole game against Colorado College in their quarter. So that's how they ended up in the semi. Other team was Oregon, which looked pretty good. They won their first few pool play games, maybe never quite clicking as well as they could have. Their offense never really seemed like it really was quite what they wanted to do.
And we talked to Coach LeVerse about that, and he was freely admitting that, and it seemed to show in this final.
It seemed a little bit that they have a philosophy they really like to huck, but they never really figured out how to adjust to the altitude here, and they, even given the altitude, they still were making some pretty bad decisions that their handlers, their throwers didn't quite have the right decision making, and it wasn't something that they were looks that Lou wants to be taking. I've been standing next to him on the sideline of games and hearing him saying, like, why are you doing that? Why would you throw that? And just, they never really quite ended up doing what they want to do.
Would you say then, did Oregon lose that semifinal game, or did Michigan win it?
It came down to, sometimes games are about a big player taking over, making huge plays. Sometimes it's just one team is slightly more consistent than the other. And this game was, I think, a little bit of that. Michigan was just a little bit higher percentage, and over the course of an entire game, it was enough for them to pull away and take a big lead. We saw something slightly different in the earlier semifinal, where UCSB went down a little bit early to Stanford, and then just completely took control of the game. Completely dominated with a big 11-2 run to just run away with it. But this game, even when Michigan was, pretty much blowing Oregon out, it still was back and forth. There were multiple turnovers every point. Neither team was really connecting. Towards the end, Michigan started to adjust a little bit to the poachy kind of defense Oregon was playing. Their handlers did a really good job of throwing some blades over the top, finding some open poached receivers, and eventually sticking in the goals they needed to win.
Got it. So looking forward to this final, we have Santa Barbara in familiar territory playing against Michigan.
Yeah, so I think it's not a huge surprise to see UCSB here. I think this is their 5th year in a row that they're playing in the final. And Michigan isn't really that much of a surprise as well if you look at some of their results. They traveled to California early for a couple of tournaments, President's Day and Stanford Invite, and they didn't have quite great results there. But I think you can excuse that. You can excuse the team from Michigan traveling to California and playing against California teams that are probably playing outside for pretty much their entire season, all the fall and the start of the spring, whereas they probably didn't get that much of a chance to do that. And then they went to Centex, and they played really well. They lost only one game. They had a Universe Point loss to Iowa, and they racked up wins over a bunch of national teams. They beat UW, UBC, Iowa State, Carleton, and they had a big 10-5 win over Stanford as well. So they're definitely, when they get rolling, they're definitely capable of putting up a result and beating just about anyone. They're pretty confident. Their handlers can control the game, and I don't know. It's going to be difficult to pick against them.
So Michigan was a little bit rocky initially, but you think now they're set straight?
I don't know, because I've seen 3 of their games, and in every game they've seemed like they're not exactly playing pretty offense, but they're doing what they need to do to win those games, and they're coming out on top against some teams that have looked some very good teams. So whatever they're doing is working. They're creating a lot of turnovers with their defensive pressure. They haven't done a whole lot of fancy stuff. It's a lot of man, and they're running, they're getting blocks, they're forcing turnovers. Another interesting thing is both these teams came from Pool A, and they faced off in the first round game on Friday morning. And that was a game that was pretty tight for a while. UCSB was up maybe a break or so at half. Michigan was as close as 8-7 before UCSB ran away with it a little bit at the end, and it ended up with a 15-11 final. So I think that this game is probably going to be pretty tight. Michigan's going to be ready to play, and they've got a chance to pull the upset here. They're definitely an underdog, but I think they've got a shot at it.
And what's your take? You going for Michigan or Santa Barbara?
So I picked against Michigan for the Oregon game and came out looking kind of foolish. I think I've got to pick. Maybe. So I'm going to pick against them again. I think UCSB, Finney and Medeiros just absolutely destroyed Stanford that last game, completely unstoppable. I don't know that Michigan has anyone who's going to be able to really slow her down that much. I'm not sure UCSB is going to be able to do that much against Becky Malinowski, but I think UCSB, they have the experience. These players have been playing in this game their entire careers, and I've got to say I think it's going to be tight. I think I'm going to go 15-12 for UCSB over Michigan.
All right. Adam Lehrman covering the women's division for Sky this weekend. And you heard it here first. Thumbs up. That's a good point.
So, other important note was Callahans were just announced, and Leela Tennell won the women's Callahan. So Leela led the UNC team to quarterfinals. Ladies? Okay. I don't know how to say that, so I try not to.
All right.
Led them to a quarterfinal spot where they lost a tight game to UCSB. They went down pretty big early and came back, and it just fell a little bit short, losing about 15-12. And she's a fifth-year player, a big part of the development of that program into a top-tier team. And congratulations to Leela.
Excellent. All right, Adam Lehrman for Sky Magazine covering the women's division this weekend. Adam, we look forward to hearing your recap of the final, and we have Adam's pick, Santa Barbara. So we're going to shift over to the Nolik Scuba Gents and talk a bit about the Open Division, starting with the semifinals that we just saw, which is the Colorado-Wisconsin matchup.
That was an incredible game, and I'm glad that I stuck around to see this tournament again this year, because that's what Ultimate is about. Colorado and Wisconsin both making athletic play after athletic play, and Wisconsin getting the better of them.
Absolutely. I think Colorado was playing a little loose in the beginning, just like they always like to, and they had a few turnovers in the beginning of the game. And despite what I saw in the first 2 days of play, apparently this was evident in the quarterfinals against Harvard, but Wisconsin was incredibly consistent and patient, and they didn't have a lot of turnovers. I believe by the end of the game they had 3 turnovers, and by the second to last point, it was the first time that Wisconsin turned it on their O-line all half. So Wisconsin definitely played consistent, and they took advantage of Colorado mistakes, and Colorado just had a hard time putting it in sometimes.
That was the issue with Wisconsin all regular season, was that they were not consistent with the disc, and they were huck happy, in my opinion. They've seemed to sort that out, and they're doing well. Also, another thing to note from this game and from this tournament, in my opinion, if there was a tournament MVP, Ben Feldman would get it if the tournament ended right now. We still have tomorrow to see, so there could be some cut players if they have a huge performance to get it, in my opinion. But
so what was Ben doing that is so significant? By the way, Ben Feldman is a Sky All-American.
Feldman has just been great on D. He guarded George Stubbs in the quarterfinal game and did a great job. He had a couple of Ds in this game where he's just come flying out of nowhere, and his hucks have just been on the money. I've seen the players try to go no huck on him straight up, and he just gets his forehand around them over and over again. I don't think he has been stopped at a huck when he really wants to get it off so far. He had one bad huck that was right to a man that kind of bladed into it. But besides that, his hucks were on the money, and he's a huge reason why Wisconsin's going to the finals.
It seemed like every time I went to my phone to tweet for Wisconsin, I was typing Ben Feldman to Colin Kemp. Colin Kemp, who had, from any game that I've ever seen him play, I don't know how long he's been playing, but for any game I've seen him play, he definitely had his best performance tonight. No matter what Colorado Colorado put on him. At one point, Jimmy Mickle was on him. No one can stop Colin Campbell. He was boxing out. He was getting to the position early, and a lot of it had to do with the fact that Ben Feldman was just hitting him in stride. But that last point, we saw Feldman get the disc. Brian and I kind of looked at each other and we're like, all right, who's cutting? We saw Colin go and we're like, that's going up. Ben Feldman hit him completely in stride. He was wide open, and that was the game.
Wisconsin won 14-10.
Yes.
How does that game compare to the Colorado Pitt matchup? Is that a similar game?
No.
That game was filled with mistakes from the start when I was watching it. Zach can go into a little bit more.
I definitely, Pittsburgh dug themselves a huge hole. There was a couple of miscues from Colorado in the Wisco game because there was a bunch of times where, to the crowd's disgust, a bunch of times where Colorado handlers were putting it to Marty Freeman, and he would run it down, and it looks like he would toe the line, and at least maybe 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 4 times, the observer called him out. So it wasn't so much the Pittsburgh turnovers were just like drops near the end zone or like really bad decisions. It was just this game was filled with explosive play from the first point. It did not fail to impress, especially when it had to live up to the 2008 reputation.
This is why you watch Ultimate.
Yeah,
games like
this game was the most impressive game of the tournament, and I think we'll get to the finals. But if the wind will hold out for us, I think Wisco Cut is going to be a fantastic game.
So let's talk about that matchup. Wisconsin Cut, they met at regionals. Wisconsin bested them by a good margin. I think it ended up being something like 14-11.
Yes, it was.
I believe it was
And
14-11.
earlier in that game, I think it might have been even 13-6. It was a big lead for Wisconsin, and Carleton went on a huge run. And I think Wisconsin got a greatest to end the game. So who knows what it will be like tomorrow. Besides that game, they're 2-2 on the series with Wisconsin getting a 13-10 win in warm-up besides the regional victory, and Carleton getting 2 convincing 13-7 wins. I think you can throw all that out the window except for the regional final, because this Wisconsin team is so much more polished than they were when I saw them at Easterns. But it's just a huge change. The athleticism was there when I saw them at Easterns, and I said if they can make the changes and be consistent, they're going to be really good, and that's what they've done.
It definitely seems like Wisconsin is peaking right now, despite the fact that they won the North Central region. I do think, however, that maybe you can compare the 2 games because of wind. If they're saying it's possibly 25-mile-per-hour winds tomorrow, but the wind here is very different from the wind at Easterns and very different from the wind at North Central regionals. It doesn't gust here; it's just apparent, and Hucks still go up. The story of the game, as I heard, was that Wisco kind of submitted to playing an upwind downwind battle while Cut tried to run the regular offense through the wind, and things just didn't work out for them. And another interesting thing of note is if you go back to Ben Feldman was saying this before we interviewed him. If you go back to the beginning of the season, USAU restructure, they separated Wisconsin, put them in the Great Lakes, and Carleton, who stayed in the North Central. And those teams petitioned to get back so the rivalry stuck. USAU agreed. You've had 4 intense games this year, and now look, you have a repeat of the North Central final in the finals of nationals.
And first time they've ever met at nationals.
And the first time they've ever met at nationals. That is right. Well, at least since 2004.
So looking at both of these teams' path to the final, Carleton has had an easier road. Do you think that's going to affect them in this final?
It's going to be interesting because there are 2 sides to the coin where Wisconsin just got out of a huge athletic, intense game, and they could be feeling the after effects of that tomorrow. Now, on one hand, I think they're going to be jacked up for the game, but I just don't know if late in the game it's going to have an effect. Now, the other side, Carleton's got some rest. The issue there is they haven't been challenged as much. They did have one game against Harvard that was a challenge, but they've still been in the lead the entire time, haven't had any difficulties really with teams, and not worried about winning. And this is going to be their first time that they're going to face a team that can beat them, I think.
If there's one team at this national tournament, is Wisconsin the team that would beat Cut?
I think Colorado would have had a really good chance of beating them, but as of now, with them being eliminated, it's obviously it's Wisco or no one. But I think Wisco was definitely on the short list to begin with.
It was Wisco of Florida, and Florida went the way of the wind. So
what is the final take final predictions for this final tomorrow.
Well, it's not unusual for me and Zach to completely disagree with each other, and we're going to do so here. I think Wisco's going to win this game. I really like the fact that they're consistent, and they're showing that they have cup-like consistency, and their athleticism is certainly better, in my opinion. So I'm going to go with Wisco winning 15-13.
I'm gonna disagree, and just for argument, I'm gonna bring up your point about Cut not being challenged. Though they did get challenged against Harvard, I really think that the Iowa game did challenge them a little bit. It was towards the end of the game. Iowa started throwing zone, and Iowa scored 2 or 3 points in a row. And though Carleton had a pretty sizable lead at that point, it was getting small. It was like 2 or 3 point lead by that point, and Iowa was pumped. They were an emotional team. They were pumped, and any other team besides Cut might have faltered and let them come back. And Cut was poised. Grant had like 3 or 4 turnovers at that point, completely uncharacteristic. He stayed incredibly active. He didn't take himself out of the play. So I think Carleton is focused. They're definitely looking to correct the mistakes that they've made. And if you think Wisco is an emotional team, though Carleton does not show it, I guarantee you they are stoked to play this Wisconsin team, and they would not have it any other way.
So what's your count?
I'm going to go with the close game, but I'm going to say Carleton. I'm going to say the other opposite side, not to make it too interesting, but 15-13 Carleton.
All right.
Callahan.
Andy Callahan.
Go ahead.
Yeah, my boy George Stubbs, who I've watched all season and thought he was going to win it, did indeed win it for Redline. He had a spectacular regular season, most of the time delivering perfect hucks and playing great defense and saving his team and with layouts to preserve offensive possession many times. He definitely deserved it, and also he is probably the definition of spirit of the game and ultimate. He's a class act. He's a great leader on the field. You rarely see him get emotional when a call is made. Congratulations to George Stubbs. I think he really deserved it.
Yeah, he got the Eastern's MVP during the year, so definitely had a lot of player respect coming to this tournament.
All right, guys, we have 2 exciting finals tomorrow.
Absolutely.
I think it's going to be a couple great matchups, and that will be all for Hard Cap today. We'll have probably one more wrap-up show tomorrow if we can squeeze it in. Adam Lerman covering the women's division, Brian Jones and Zach Smith covering open. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Elliot.
Later, bro.
You just got capped.